to those facing eviction, and it coordinates pro bono health care for the uninsured. There are many ways that such a fund or foundation could be designed, beginning with the last aging generation that experienced legal segregation, and then it could be expanded if it catches on. But today I'm simply planning the idea. Think about it. It's the perfect memorial to our past and our next lasting contribution to society, a vehicle of both gratitude and restitution to those who inspired our nation to choose redemption over genocide. I believe that they are really deserving of veteran status as nonviolent soldiers in America's own domestic Cold War, a cold civil war that led to a more perfect union yet again. You are the best hope, not just in Birmingham, but in the world to make this happen. And sometimes the right thing to do is also the smart thing to do. And I thank you for giving me the forum here to propose this to you. Please consider it carefully. Thank you so much. Yeah, we've got a few minutes if you have any questions about Werner or anything. Mm-hmm.
Diane, I've always been curious, and maybe you could enlighten us, how did they end up choosing Huntsville as a place to put the rocket scientists? If somebody had asked me in the 50s, where's a great place to put a couple hundred Germans, I would not have guessed Alabama would be a great home for us.
Okay, a couple of reasons. There was a wartime arsenal there. Redstone and Huntsville arsenals had built incendiary bombs and chemical bombs, which were never used, but we were ready to use them in case the other side did. And so they had an abandoned arsenal, and they had been competing to get a wind tunnel located there and lost out to Tullahoma, Tennessee. And so the Germans were sort of the consolation prize. And then presto, we have NASA. In Huntsville, it's kind of obscure in the NASA family, but it was by far, and I think still is, the largest NASA installation. And so that's how they got there. They had been at Fort Bliss in El Paso, Texas, for 5 years, from about 45 or 46 to 50. But that's how they got to Huntsville. And then they were working for the Army, building ballistic missiles, the Redstone, the Jupiter. They built the sort of iconic missiles of the Cold War. And then one of the great things about the book is that about the subject is this Huntsville is this complete military-industrial complex because it's got all the Army stuff going on as well as the NASA stuff and the university. Anybody else? Mm-hmm.
How did you decide to write about Huntsville?
Well, actually, I met somebody, and I used to live in Cambridge, Mass., and I left, and a friend of mine up there revealed to me after I'd known him for some time that he had been married to one of the daughters of the German. He was a mathematician, and the way he described Huntsville was that the Germans lived on this little lake on the mountain with little garden gnomes and stuff, and sung Lieder, German Lieder after dinner every night, and they all played the violin. So I thought, man, that sounds really weird in Alabama. So that was before I wrote the Birmingham book, and so it was percolating for a while, and I was raising children and just didn't see how I was going to be able to do the research because I living from New York down here. So then they're in college now, so I was able to do it. But that was the seed that was planted back then, and it's just too good, And in the people who have heard of Von Braun, there's a famous. Do you guys know who Tom Lehrer was? He was this satirical songwriter in the 50s, 60s who was just a genius. You can get him on YouTube. I really commend you to do that. It's Tom Lehrer. And his most famous ditty was about, and this is what most people who know about Von Braun know this song. It's the quotable line is, "Once the rockets go up, who cares where they come down? That's not my department," says Werner von Braun. And then he's talking about how Nazi schmanzi, I'm learning to count down in Chinese. So anyway, it's just it's kind of a so anyway, very few people know when I say that when I say I'm working on this book about them, then they say, well, why would you do that? And I said, because they were in Alabama, and most people don't realize that. It's just it's rich. Mm-hmm.
I've read Carry Me Home.
Thank you.
Once you wrote that book and some subsequent articles that came out afterwards, how was your reception received in Huntsville once you started investigating?
You mean were they worried?
How are you being received? Like, well, here she comes.
Yeah, well, let me put it this way. The archive that I'm in now, I started trying to get into about 6 or 7 years ago, and first it has Von Braun's letters, and they first tried to charge me $100 an hour to work there, and so then I had to go through. I had to kind of explain to them that's not really what archives do, and and I couldn't afford it. What about you're supposed to actually be available to students who. But it wasn't just me though. They were because I think a lot of, especially TV crews, would come down there and talk to the Germans and say, "Oh, we want to talk to you about the Saturn rocket, and you put the man on the moon," and then the thing would come out, and it would be Nazis in outer space. So they felt kind of burned by that, and I said, "You can't write a 500-page whatever." Not anti-Nazi diatribe or something. So, yeah, the Germans most of them are now dead, but I did get to talk to about probably 20 or so before, because I actually started doing the interviews when my kids were still at home and while they were at summer camp. But as I said, there is this real defensiveness up there about it, just as there is here about civil rights, and it's kind of like it's this tainted. The glory is somewhat tainted because of the origins of the Saturn, and they really, the concentration camp element of it was kept under wraps for so long that they're still kind of living through the shock of those revelations. It's pretty shocking when I've read a number of memoirs of the camp and everything, and histories of it, and it was bad.
In your generation and within a circle of friends, do you think that carried me home was able to bridge?
Did it what now?
Was carried me home able to bridge that gap at all?
Yeah. You know what? I found that the older generation, like my parents' generation, was a little more hostile to it, but my generation, because I think partly it was because I was 10 in 1963, so I was 10 when the church was bombed, so I was 11 when segregation ended, and so I think the way my generation reacted was that we had experienced it. We knew that what I was describing had happened, but we didn't feel responsible. So I think a lot of the reaction I had from my white cohort was kind of relief that to have all that explained, because there's this great cultural amnesia here, which you have probably. I don't know how much this resonated for you guys. The whole thing about let's don't talk about it. Whether this has trickled down to your generation or not. Maybe has it? Would you say? Do you feel defensive about Birmingham? Not so much? Well, that's really good. But my generation still feels that sort of defensiveness, but also, more, also believing it more. What I say is that there's this whole rush to closure, but nobody wants to go through atonement or revelation or anything to get there. So what Birmingham has tried to do is go from amnesia about all this to closure, and you can't get there. You can't get around it. You've got to go through it, and that's one of the reasons that with this foundation or fund that I thought of, I realized that the victims of this and the heroes have been acknowledged to a certain extent, but the victims have never had anybody say, "Gosh, I'm sorry." And these were policies of the state. They weren't, these were political crimes in some sense. They weren't crimes of passion or random crimes. So that people like Sarah Collins suffered under. So that's why I really feel that it would be great if the city could, the community could put up something just to say, I'm sorry or thank you, to people like that. I don't know. Is that we done? Thanks so much, guys. Keep up the good work.
Thank you so much for coming and sharing your story. Both Birmingham and Huntsville changed the world in their own ways, and we really appreciate you coming and telling a little bit about both. But we're excited to be in a position as a generation to be able to celebrate what Birmingham did and go through those stages of atonement and bring Birmingham to its place in the international scene. So thank you for everything you're doing to that end. And in appreciation of you coming to speak to us today, we've made a donation in your name to our internationally award-winning literacy program. It's called Ready to Read. Puts a full second-grade library in every second-grade classroom in the Birmingham City Schools. We really appreciate literacy, and if Birmingham has produced more Pulitzer Prizes than any other place in the world per square foot, we hope to have a lot more readers to read your work. They're ready to read. One quick introduction I failed to mention on the front end. Diane's mom is with us today, so thank you so much for coming today. Also, guys, a lot of good things coming up. Come out to Turkey Creek this Saturday. Also, we have 2 great social events next week. We've got the Happy Hour at Dram on Tuesday and the African Sundowners at the Trails of Africa on Thursday. Diane, if you're still in town and you want to come out, we'd love to have you. With that, this meeting is adjourned.